What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube, and today I've got some football focus. I've been trying to look at the Pittsburgh Steelers roster post-NFL draft and post-height of free agency, and kind of looking and comparing positionally at different places where Pittsburgh has improved or not improved, and kind of what to expect with this coming season's NFL roster. Looking especially at some of the areas of need and moments of weakness that Pittsburgh has had in the last year or few that we needed to address this offseason. I have a video right now up on my channel. Go check that out. It's the last video I posted on this channel about Pittsburgh's offensive line situation. Looking at the offensive line from last year to this year with all of the draft additions and free agency additions and changes Pittsburgh has made, looking at where the Pittsburgh Steelers have improved their offensive line. I want to do the same thing today with the cornerback position. Cornerback has been something Pittsburgh has been up and down on for a long time now, and cornerback is an area of need, and Pittsburgh has certainly made some changes and additions to the roster. So I want to look at all of the big pieces on that cornerback room and see kind of who fits where, who can get some playing time, who can make a difference, who can make the team, and who's not going to make the team. If you guys want to see, again, the offensive line video I did, or the free agency addition pieces, the guys we got and let go, the draft, all that stuff is up on my channel now, so go check those out. But today, I'm talking about 8 guys in the Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback room because we have 8 names who are kind of known big names, quantifiable pieces that could potentially be on Pittsburgh's roster at the start of the regular season this year, 2023. And that's a bit alarming because Pittsburgh usually generally is going to keep between 5 and 6 people, right? They never keep less than 5 corners on the roster because of injury. You never keep really more than 6. 6 is kind of your sweet spot that you like to keep. I tend to like to keep 6 when I'm constructing a roster. So I'm going to say there's a good chance that 6 corners make this roster, but there are 8 guys on this roster who have or could contribute at some point here in Pittsburgh. So let's go ahead and talk about them. Number 1, let's discuss what we lost from last year, and that mainly is Cam Sutton. Pittsburgh has had a hard time with those slot corners the last couple of years. Mike Hilton left a few years ago. Cam Sutton filled in as one of the better covering slot corners in the league, and then bumped up to outside and played a lot of outside last year, and what was up and down. He was not perfect. He was not always the best edge tackler, the best edge rush guy. That was more of Hilton's specialty. Had really good moments of coverage, but then also got beat on some pretty important things as well. But he left. He went to, I believe, the Detroit Lions, and that was kind of a big loss for us. That was, losing again your top slot corner for the last several years, a Pittsburgh guy who plays like a Steeler and plays in the system and knows the system, but also can play outside and can be a long-term starter and does more good than bad. So losing him was a big deal, especially when we're coming off a year when one of our other starting corners, who was looked to be a guy that was potentially the future for us, had a really down season. But let's talk about the 8 guys who are on this roster. And number 1 is potentially our biggest free agency addition in the entire free agency offseason, and that is Patrick Peterson. The indefatigable long-term veteran, Patrick Peterson, has kind of wanted to be a Steeler for a long time, and we want him here. In spite of his aging situation, and as old as he is, he's still underratedly fast, he's still strong, he's still a playmaker, he's around the ball. That's one thing that Sutton was not a big thing, was intercepting. He would force a couple fumbles here and there, he'd pick off a few passes here and there, but he wasn't a big turnover machine, where Peterson is an explosive guy who can do a lot of things in both the return game in the past and as a turnover machine for the defense. Pittsburgh added a lot of physical guys this offseason and a lot of guys who are around the ball creating splash plays, which Pittsburgh has been lacking. Patrick Peterson does both. He signed a 2-year deal this offseason. He has played 12 seasons in the NFL and has gotten 34 picks. The guy just makes plays, and he is a diverse piece too, because he obviously is our ace. He's our number 1 corner right now and is probably going to play mostly on the outside, but because of his age and because of the skill set and the range he still has, he can play inside if needed. There's talks about moving him around. We've heard the coaches say he can play slot. He might play some safety. He might roam and play some inside linebacker. They're going to move him around a little bit and use him to the best of his ability, and I like that diversity. And again, positional flexibility. We always talk about what Mike Tomlin loves. So I think Peterson could play inside at certain times, Mostly he's going to be our outside guy, but I'll talk about the potential of the inside in a second. Number 2 is our second corner, Levi Wallace, a guy we signed from Buffalo, another physical guy. We signed from Buffalo last offseason to a 2-year deal. He played his first year here in Pittsburgh and had 4 interceptions last year. Was it 4 interceptions last year? I believe so. He was a guy who I think started the season kind of rough, much like a lot of our defense actually, especially when TJ wasn't playing because the pass rush was less. So the coverage breakdowns happened more often, and the coverage was asked to cover receivers more for longer periods of time. Wallace started off a little bit weak and even injured at times, a little banged up. But in the second half of the season, when the whole team kind of made their run and their 7-2 finish in the last 9 games, Levi Wallace was a really good piece and was the best turnover corner that we had last year, and I like the way he finished the season. I like Wallace. I think he played pretty solid last year, and I think he makes a really good number 2 corner. So obviously he is returning for the last year of his deal, and he's going to be a starter. Now here comes the question. Joey Porter Jr., here comes what's going to change now. JPJ is another long, physical guy who has one of the better incompletion percentages in college last year. Tall, long, physical, has solid instincts, doesn't really get many interceptions, and does need to get his head around quicker and watch pass interferences. He gets a little grabby sometimes, he turns around a little late sometimes. But we love the attitude, we love the lineage, we love the physicality. Now comes the question about starters, because we know Porter's going to play quite a bit. He was selected number 32, first pick in the second round, extension of a first round pick, fell to us at 32, really is a top 14 to 17 pick in my opinion. Got him as a steal. He's going to be playing a lot this year. Now the question becomes, do you start Wallace and Porter on the outside and bump Peterson to the inside because he can play better on the inside? Or do you wind up with Peterson and Porter playing? Does Porter come on super strong and make Wallace kind of your third corner, your first outside backup? Because I don't think that Wallace or Porter are slot corners. They're not going to play the third corner inside very often. So does this mean that Peterson bumps inside, or does this mean that Porter becomes so good quickly that he takes Wallace's spot and makes Wallace the third corner? Either way, those 3 guys are your main 3 guys next season, but what happens with Porter's development will dictate kind of what happens with the starting outside corner and where Peterson goes. Either way, you've added a top-flight first-round rookie in the second round, and you've brought in Peterson. So you've made this cornerback room instantly better. Now let's talk about depth. Let's talk about the 5 guys who are also on this roster. Akello Weatherspoon, the most interesting name on this roster, and one that is, his future is the most interesting. Came over from San Fran, highly touted, high upside, also a lot of blown plays. A lot of potential, but a lot of unfulfilled potential coming from San Fran. He is now in his 3rd season here in Pittsburgh. Came in 2021, played for the rest of that year. Didn't really start early in the season, was kind of on the bench, and it's like, well, we brought this guy over. He has a high pedigree. Why isn't he playing more? Started, I think, the last 3 games of 2021 and had 4 interceptions, I believe. Was really came on those last 3, 4, 5 games of the year as a shutdown corner. He was our best corner by far, not only for that period of time, but I think for the whole season. I think he made enough impact in those 3 games to really make a difference. He was a big third down stopper. He was a big goal line guy. He was playing really high-quality football. So we re-signed him as a priority last season to a 2-year deal. Came in last season, and I don't know if he was hurt the entire time. I know he did battle some injuries that were publicized later on, but really didn't play well. He got beat deep on a lot of stuff, especially on big plays down the sidelines, on like bigger-bodied receivers. Guys like Devontae Smith, who I guess isn't that big-bodied, but Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown cooked him quite a bit. Who's the other big guy that got him? There was somebody else that was cooking him too, from Tennessee. I don't know. I'm thinking of A.J. Brown and a couple other guys who just really, he's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of his name right now. The guy from Seattle, DK Metcalf. They were beating Weatherspoon quite a bit, and he wasn't looking good. And I was the first to say his body positioning wasn't always bad. He wasn't getting like totally burnt down the sidelines. He was keeping up with the receiver, and his body position was in decent spots, but he wasn't getting his head around. He wasn't jumping and high pointing the ball at the right times, and he was getting out physicaled, and that's the thing you don't want. That's the addition of Porter. That's the addition of Peterson. Getting plays at the right times, being physical, and getting off the field on third downs, and that's where Witherspoon was lacking this year. So now the question becomes, is Witherspoon more what he was like in 2021 and being our number one kind of shutdown corner at times? Or is that just an aberration? Was 2022 more of who he was? Or is he good but the injuries held him back? We'll have to find out. That's the biggest unanswered question in this cornerback room. And at this point, he's one of the bigger cap hits left on the team that would be staying on the team. I think it's only $5 million. But he's one of those guys that, well, we just brought in a high-end rookie and signed a big name, and we have a couple other guys we brought in as well. So with so many additions to this room and getting younger and getting more physical, does Witherspoon have a spot here? Especially, if you're going to pay him $5 million, not a big deal for a starting corner at all, but if he's going to be your, at best, fourth cornerback, if he's going to be behind Peterson, Wallace, and Porter, is it worth paying him that kind of money? Does he still have unfettered potential to look at? I don't know. I personally, if I'm making a prediction here, don't think he's going to be on the roster come opening day. I think he's going to wind up getting traded or even cut. Where some other guys like Dotson may get traded if someone else will give us like a 4th or 5th round pick, or if another starter on a different team goes down and suddenly someone needs a starter who's got experience. Someone like Dotson makes sense to go somewhere else. Even a Trubisky makes sense to go somewhere else. But Witherspoon, there's a lot of questions with injury now. There's a lot of questions with ability now. And Witherspoon, again, with that much money against the cap for a backup, he might just be cut. So I don't think he remains on this roster starting the regular season. I think they give him camp and maybe even some preseason to see where he can be. But come regular season, I don't see him on this roster. But who knows? Then we have two different battles, right? If we're going to keep 6 guys, let's assume for right now Witherspoon's on the roster. So you've got Peterson, Wallace, Porter, and Witherspoon. You've got 2 spots left and 4 guys left. And you've got two sets of guys who do very similar things, right? You've got 2 different battles here. The first is the slot position dedicated corner, and that is between Arthur Maulet and Chandon Sullivan. So Arthur Maulet is a guy who has played 2 years in Pittsburgh. He was signed away from the Jets. He was known as a hitter, physical guy, came over a couple years ago, and has been a pretty consistent player. He's played in, I think, all but one game, maybe even all games for the Steelers since he's been here. Been pretty healthy, pretty consistent, pretty available. In 2 years in Pittsburgh, he's gotten 106 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a pick. Now, he's not really a cover corner. He's very much a lower-end Mike Hilton, right? Mike Hilton was a decent cover corner that really specialized a lot in those edge blitzes and those, tackles. But Mike Hilton was more complete. Maulet is not really a cover guy who's even at times been a bit of a liability in coverage. While he makes plays here and there and he's not terrible in coverage, he has not been great. And I think last year was a weaker year for him as far as the coverage goes. But as far as being a box slot, kind of that Mike Hilton, he's going to rush the passer on like nickel and dime blitzes. He's going to be a guy who can get in the backfield and tackle the running back. He's going to make some hits on the wide receivers who are running free. He's going to be a hitter who's a physical guy who's going to make a few plays here and there, but he's not going to be a slot cover guy, which has been a weakness for us over the past several years. That's Maulet. Again, he's getting a few sacks, he's tackling, he's getting a few forced fumbles. But is that enough? We brought over another dedicated slot corner in Chandon Sullivan, who has played in 5 total seasons so far. He's bounced around. He's played for 3 different teams. Pittsburgh is his 4th team here now in 6 seasons, but he has a lot of starting experience. He's played in quite a bit of games, and over those 5 seasons, he has 169 total tackles, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, 5 interceptions, and 1 touchdown. And then I think he had 1 or 2 touchdowns called back as well. So Sullivan can make some plays. He's a bit better of a cover corner than Maulet is, but he's not quite the hitter Maulet is. You put these 2 guys together and you've got a hell of a player, right? But I think Sullivan leans more toward the coverage and Maulet leans more toward the hitting. While neither guy is bad at either, those are the strengths of those 2 guys. So do you remain with your hitter in Maulet, who's been here for a couple of years and been consistent for us in what he does, or do you go with the new guy in Sullivan? I don't know that there's a reason to keep both of these guys because they're both just slot corners, and I think a few other guys might amalgamate over there. But now, if you want to keep all three of your main starters outside, and Witherspoon's an outside corner as well, so do you need both these guys to play in the slot? That might affect what happens with the last two guys on this list. We have two guys now who are outside corners, who are younger and a bit unproven to some degree. But the last two guys, number one, Corey Trice, the 7th round pick out of Purdue. He's got 106 tackles in college, 5 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns. Corey Trice is a guy that I really like for a 7th round pick. I didn't know much about him beforehand. Heard his name a few times, but he wasn't on my radar in the draft. All of a sudden, I started seeing his name. People were going, oh, he's a 4th round value. He's a 3rd round value in the 7th round. He had a few injury concerns, but he's been healthy for the whole last year. People were scared of him because he got hurt 2 years ago, but he played a whole season since then. Pittsburgh stole him 4 rounds later than he was projected. He was a top 10 corner for some people, and he went this late. I love this. And the one knock on him that I gave in my draft video was that he looked undersized to me. He played like he was a bit smaller to me in terms of his size. And I was corrected in the comments by several of you, and rightfully so. Thank you for your corrections. Corey Trice is 6'3" and 215 pounds. He just didn't look like it on tape because I didn't know him that well. But in watching him back closer and watching more analysts go over his tape, I stand corrected. Corey Trice always played physical and always played with a chip on his shoulder and played with long arms and good press coverage. But now I'm seeing that he has physical attributes too. He is tall and he does have some weight to him and some size to him and some underrated speed. He is going to be somebody who could definitely make this roster as a 7th round pick. He could do what a couple other 7th rounders have done for us and more over the past couple of years. I like Trice a lot. Again, bringing over guys who are around the ball, who are not afraid to be physical, who are not afraid to press up and play man coverage on the outside. Pittsburgh has needed that. He is a big improvement to this roster, especially for the value we got him for, 7th round pick. Now that might put a damper on the final guy on this list, James Pierre. He was a undrafted guy for us 3 years ago. Camp Phenom, was talked about in camp, had a really good camp 3 years ago, really good preseason, but then hasn't done much since then. Came on 2 years ago, had to start a bit for some injuries, and it kind of looked a bit exposed. And then came back in last year's preseason and kind of looked a bit exposed. I think the newness of him wore off. I think the excitement of a fresh body who we stole in undrafted free agency wore off. In the past 3 seasons, he's gotten 86 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. So he has made some plays. He's not been bereft of plays, but he's somebody that I think is probably the weakest cover guy on this list, probably even more so than Maulet and Sullivan. And I think with a 7th round steal who's got higher value, I don't know that he has enough reason to be on this list. I don't think he does enough in special teams or in coverage to be on this list now. With the depth we have and the value of guys we have, I don't think he makes the team anymore. So now it comes down to, is Witherspoon going to be here or not? If Witherspoon is gone, you can keep Peterson, Wallace, Porter, Maulet, Sullivan, and Trice. Right? Because I think we're letting go of Pierre. You can keep your 4 outside guys and your 2 slot guys if you trade Witherspoon. If you're going to keep Witherspoon and it's Peterson, Wallace, Porter, Witherspoon, you've got to choose between Maulet and Sullivan because I think you want to keep Trice unless he really plays poorly. So it's going to come down to Trice versus Pierre and Maulet versus Sullivan, and depends what happens with Witherspoon. My prediction here, since I'm going to just put this out there, I'm going to say Peterson, Wallace, and Porter are our main starters. I think Witherspoon gets cut if he's not traded for like a 5th or 6th round pick, but I think he's cut. And then I think you keep Maulet, Sullivan, and Trice, and you cut James Pierre. So you've got Peterson, Wallace, Porter, and Trice on the outside, your tackler and Maulet on the inside, and your cover guy and Sullivan on the inside. So you've got 6 corners, 4 outside, 2 inside, 2 new draft picks, 2 guys you traded for, so you got 4 fresh bodies on this team, and I think you've improved exponentially. Bringing Sullivan in as a cover slot guy helps. Drafting 2 guys, stealing Porter in the 2nd, stealing Trice in the 7th, bringing over a veteran like Peterson who can play in diversity and make turnovers, even with losing Cam Sutton. I think you've improved this roster greatly. That is my deep dive. That's my prediction. What do you guys think? Does Witherspoon stay? Who wins those two battles I talked about? Tell me in the comments below. Again, check out the offensive line deep dive and all the draft and free agency coverage. And if you like these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. And talk to me in the comments so that I'll keep doing these. Go Steelers. Take care.